In one of my recent videos, we discussed at the beginning of the video what, or if anything, should the government be doing to get involved with helping out with the affordable housing crisis that's going on in the US. And obviously it's a worldwide issue, but right now we're just talking about the US. And pretty much the overwhelming majority of the people in the comments said that the government should not be involved. Let the free market do its work, and everything will correct itself on its own. And I want to get into a discussion on this because this topic clearly struck a chord with a lot of people. That video I think has like 25,000 views or something as of me recording this, and probably over 1,000 comments now. So most videos that I make, guys, don't get over 1,000 comments. I mean, people had a lot to say about this issue. So clearly it's something that we should discuss further on the channel, considering we talk about real estate and the economy here. So let's dive into this a little bit. First of all, I just want to clarify, at the beginning of that video, I pretty much just asked everyone, should the government be involved in forcing people to rent vacant properties? Should they be involved in stopping institutional investment and things like that? And half the people kind of took it the wrong way and thought all of a sudden that I'm saying that these things should or shouldn't be done. I think that's probably what happens when people get emotional. But anyways, I was just asking a question, and the actual idea that I proposed in that video was to give owner-occupants, home buyers, first dibs on buying any type of residential property over any type of investor. So for example, it's the same thing that HomePath does when you want to buy a foreclosure. They have properties listed on there, and for the first 30 days, only owner-occupants can bid on the property. Investors cannot. And then if it stays on the site longer than 30 days, then investors can jump in and try to pick it up. The biggest pushback I saw from this idea from people in the comments was, well, what's to stop the owners from just listing the price too high for the first 30 or 60 days, whatever that it's available, and hoping to get a higher offer from an investor after that initial period is over? Which I can understand people saying that, but you know, guys, I've worked in real estate for a long time, and 9 times out of 10, an investor is going to offer cash and they're going to lowball you much lower than what a owner-occupied home buyer would pay, because the person that's going to live in the property is not quite as concerned with the price as much as they're concerned with the monthly payment, which is definitely evident because that's part of what got us into this whole mess that we're in right now. But an investor's goal is to either flip the property or get it rented out, and so the investor's always going to want to pick up the property at the lowest possible price, which is what I tell everybody on the channel to do as well. So if people were trying to hold out and wait for a better offer from an investor, the odds of that happening are slim to none, guys. So I don't think that tactic would work, and obviously if an idea like that was implemented, then there would need to be some way to make sure that doesn't happen. Other people on the channel said that foreign investors and institutional investors should be banned altogether. As an agent and as somebody who believes in America, I think that there should be some laws in place to safeguard against this, because living in Miami, guys, probably for a good 3 or 4 years there after the market was recovering during the last crash, from probably like 2011 to 2015, and even through this day, but back then in that period in particular, real estate was so cheap here because everything dropped like 50% that the amount of foreign investment was unreal, guys. I'll bet you half of this city is owned by someone who doesn't live in the US, and I'm not even kidding. That's not an exaggeration or, you know, an overstatement. That's probably just the reality, because we have so many international buyers here that pick up properties from South America, from Europe, from Russia, from China, and everywhere, guys. The fact that people from other countries can come in and buy up our real estate while the average American suffers doesn't sound very American to me. And so I think there is some merit to that idea, and also banning the institutional investors as well, right? But once again, guys, we're going back to the same notion where the overwhelming majority of you, not everyone, but probably like 80 to 90% of you said the government shouldn't be involved. So in order for us to ban foreign investment or institutional investment, guess what? The government has to be involved. And don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying that I want the government to be involved. I'm just saying in order for something like that to happen, the government would need to be involved. Common sense, right? And to be honest, the most frustrating thing for me when I was reading through a lot of the responses is most people just said something along the lines of, no, the government should never be involved in a capitalist system, let the free market do its work. But that's a delusional statement for a couple reasons, guys. Because first of all, the government's involved in everything already. That's just the facts. But the thing that I found most frustrating about those statements was the fact that no one who said that offered up a viable alternative. They just said, oh, the government shouldn't be involved. So a lot of you are saying, yeah, there's a problem, but not really offering any solutions or ideas to fix it. So acknowledging that there's a problem with no solution is basically useless, if you ask me. But to say, oh no, the government shouldn't be involved, guys, who are you kidding? Who do you think controls all of the zoning laws and what type of housing can be built? Look at where I'm walking, okay? You see all these places? These are all little condo buildings. Do you think you can build a single family home next to this building? No. Why not? Because the government says you can't. So it gets me a little upset because people say things like that, but don't realize or think about first that, hey, wait a minute, these guys have created all these problems that we already have, and I understand that's where the statement comes from, that we don't want the government to be involved further, but they did all this damage. Don't you think that maybe they should take a part in reversing some of it? That was kind of the genesis of my idea. But I also understand that everything they try to do somehow backfires, and there can be unintended consequences that would be unforeseen and somehow could make things worse. I get that, and I do think that's a possibility, However, from my idea that I mentioned of giving owner-occupant buyers the first right of refusal on a property, I really don't see how that can make things worse, because you're really just giving someone who wants to buy the property a chance to buy it before an investor. And I think that's just kind of leveling the playing field. It's not even banning investors. It's not even saying you can't buy. It's just saying you can't buy it yet. And so since we already just covered that this is not really a free market, because the government has their hands in everything already. They control what can be built, where it can be built, how high it can be built, density of what can be built, the color of what can be built. They control all that stuff already, guys. So once again, I pose the question to you, if the government shouldn't be involved, then what should happen in order to fix this mess, okay? You don't want the government involved? Fine, I don't want them involved either. How do we fix it then? That's what I want to know. Because another thing I read and I understand is that people say, well, it's not really a right to be able to buy a house. It takes a lot of hard work and saving and good credit and all that. Well, I agree. It does take those things. Not everybody should be entitled to buy a property if you're not financially disciplined enough to do it. I agree with that. But that's not really the issue here. The issue that really is at play is that housing used to be affordable in many different areas across the country, and now it's not. That's the real issue that we're facing right now. So it's not so much as should people have the right to buy, it's that the people that even are doing the right things financially no longer can, and that's really the big part of the problem we're in right now. Also, guys, I think it's very important to remember just how big of a part the Fed has played in all this as well, which is not part of the federal government, by the way. It's easy to blame everything on the government, but the reality is, and in my opinion, the Fed has had the largest impact on this market more than the government has, because keeping interest rates artificially low for an extended period of time really helped people buy that normally wouldn't be able to buy, even at the prices that were even at pre-pandemic prices. Imagine if we had pre-pandemic pricing, going back to 2019, but interest rates back then were 6% for a mortgage. Do you think we would have seen this run up in sales that we saw? No, we wouldn't, because the payments would still be significantly higher than what people got during the low interest period. Now, when you combine that low interest period with quantitative easing that's also produced by the Fed, but also enabled by the government, and the amount of stimulus money that went out in the form of stimulus checks and PPP loans, guys. Let's not forget that a lot of these type of loans were used for real estate investment that probably shouldn't have been, and there's going to be investigations into these things, but whether or not that's going to actually return any of the funds has yet to be seen. But you know, if it wasn't for that stimulus money and combined with the low interest rates, we would not have gotten into this predicament to begin with. But the reason why I say the Fed is more to blame in this situation than the government is because I think that even if we had no stimulus, right? There was no stimulus money sent out, nobody got PPP loans, nobody got the stimulus checks, nothing like that. We still would have seen the big run-up in real estate that we saw due to extremely low mortgage rates, because that was the real fuel to the fire, because it just allows so many people to buy because it makes the payments so affordable. So essentially, anyone who was already planning on buying and the interest rates dropped to ultra low levels like they did for mortgages, it just made it so much easier for people who already were in the financial position to buy to go ahead and do it. And it also helped people that actually wouldn't be able to buy to be able to, because the rates were so low. So I hope you guys understand that. Another idea that I saw in the comments, and I'm just going over a lot of things that you guys said here, this is not my opinion, guys, or my idea, was for homeowners to receive a tax credit to sell to an owner-occupied borrower, which on the surface sounds like a pretty good idea, but guess what? The government needs to be involved. How are you going to get that tax credit? Only if the government gives it to you, right? And just to give you guys an idea, we're not talking about just being able to afford properties in expensive areas like here in Miami or in Los Angeles or San Francisco, New York, these places where prices were already high even before the pandemic. Places that used to be affordable, guys, are no longer affordable. I saw in the very same comment section, you can go look for yourself, people that live in Tennessee and in Maine, Indiana, Ohio, South Dakota. These are all very traditional real estate markets, you know, nothing crazy going on in these places, and the average person there can't afford to buy property there. So if you're telling me that that's not a problem and you think it's a problem that's going to fix itself, tell me how, because I don't see the solution of how it's going to fix itself. Because as long as foreign money can come in and buy up cheap real estate, which is a bargain for them, because when you look at real estate prices in other desirable and developed countries across the world, it can be significantly more than in the US. The incentive for foreign buyers to come in and buy up our real estate is extremely high, especially because of the economy that we're in right now and the volatility, and especially with the currencies and the price of their currencies dropping due to a strong dollar. It makes more sense than ever for foreign investors to park their money here in the US because of the currency devaluations that they have going on in their home countries. And when the dollar is strong, that's a way for them to essentially hang on to their wealth. I saw other people saying, well, we should tax the homeowners who leave the places empty, like we saw in the first example in the video of the rental property that's been sitting there 6 months. And people are saying we should do like what San Francisco's doing and tax the empty homes if it's empty for more than 6 months. And personally, guys, I think that everything San Francisco does is a disaster. So following anything that they're saying to do is probably not a good idea, because all you got to do is go visit over there and see how well things are working out for the people that live in San Francisco. Really, besides picking on San Francisco, the reason why I don't like that idea is because taxing a vacant property owner to leave the place empty still doesn't do anything to help the person that actually needs a place to live. All it does is penalize the current homeowner for leaving the property empty, and then that tax money gets funneled to the government, and what are they going to do with it? Probably nothing good, or nothing that you want done with it, or nothing that is actually going to help people that need a place to live. You know, just like you guys said, that every time the government does something, they screw it up. So collecting extra tax money from these homeowners probably isn't going to do anything. I also saw a lot of comments from people saying, well, just let the free market work itself out and the whole market will collapse under its own weight. Yeah, in theory, that would be great. But it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, because if we look at what happened in 2020, that's what should have happened. The entire real estate market and the economy, for that matter, should have collapsed. But what happened? Government intervention, guys, and that's why we made it here with what we already talked about. The ultra low interest rates combined with the stimulus money was the perfect storm to get us into this market. And if we go back to the crash of 2008, it was a pretty decent sized crash for housing, but the economy and the housing market artificially recovered after that because of, once again, government stimulus. You know, after we got into the recession, the Great Recession, what comes next? Quantitative easing by the Fed, you know, making money cheaper, more available in the economy, lowering interest rates again to incentivize people to go out there and spend and to buy real estate. And that's what they do, guys. I mean, they interfere. And instead of letting the free market collapse on its own, as some of you have said, that's not what happened. You know, prices should have went down much further than they did during the last Great Recession, but because of government intervention, they were able to recover sooner than later. And even with the government intervention, it still took, you know, a good 5 years for prices to start finally rising back up again. And that was with stimulation, guys. So imagine if they did nothing, how long it would take for prices to go back up if there was no government intervention. I think that you could easily double that time frame, maybe even 10 years later, for a real true recovery to happen, to let the free market do its work. But I think everybody who's calling for this, saying, yeah, you know, let the free market collapse on its own, is also living in a fantasy world, because I don't see an example of this happening. I mean, if you do, please let me know in the comments. But from what I can tell, every time the government does get involved and somehow make things worse, just like artificially recovering us from the Great Recession. I'm just gonna keep going, guys. I'm gonna keep sharing some of the other ideas that I read here. So pretty much the whole video is going to be about this, because there's so much to discuss. Another commenter said to give home buyers a subsidy to compete because the home prices are so high. But in reality, guys, that's a terrible idea, because all that's going to do is force home prices higher, because you're giving people more money to pay for higher price homes. So what's that going to do to prices? Just going to drive them even higher. It's also going to make inflation worse. So I'm sorry to whoever said that, but that's really not a good idea. And that kind of goes similar with this idea as well. Somebody said if you don't have a USA address and you're not an American citizen, then you should be forced to pay double for any given property that you want to buy here. That's never going to happen, first of all. And even if it did, that's another way that's going to force prices up, guys. How? Well, because when you buy real estate and you price properties to sell, you go based on comparable sales in the neighborhood. And if properties are selling for double than what they are right now, it's going to double prices. So that's not going to help anything. You know, that's just going to make it much more expensive for the average Joe to buy as well. Another idea was to limit how many single family homes investors could buy in any given neighborhood or zip code. And while that could work, what has to happen? Government intervention. Another idea was to increase property taxes on investment properties, but the reality is most counties already do this, guys. Like here in Florida, for example, we have the homestead exemption, and a lot of states have that, which allows owner-occupied properties to pay quite a bit less in property taxes each year than properties that are second homes or investment properties, and it puts a much lower cap on how much property taxes can go up every year, which is 3% per year versus 10% for investment properties. So they already do that, and that doesn't seem to be working. And once again, just like the idea of taxing the empty homes, it also does nothing to help people that need a place to live that's affordable. So that's the number one reason why I would be against raising taxes of any kind, because I don't see that helping anyone. And one of the final comments that I'm going to go over, and which is actually very true, the real answer is to just build more housing that people need. And I completely agree. But with the big BUT, who's preventing that from happening to begin with? The government. Going back to what we talked about earlier with all the zoning restrictions. And look at all these places we're walking by here, guys. Do you see any single family homes? No, you can't build a single family home here. Now, obviously that's for good reason, because that would make real estate even more expensive in this area, because you have a lot of multifamily around here. That's all that's here on this north end of Bay Harbor Island. Once again, the government is in charge of what type of housing can be built, where, how high, what color, you name it. So yeah, we do need more housing, but guess what? Let me show you something. Here is an empty lot right across the street from where I'm walking. And this isn't a whole lot of land, but it's a decent little plot of land. And let's say maybe you could fit like 20 tiny homes on this property right here. Do you think the city of Bay Harbor Islands is going to allow that? They're not. So the government is also preventing affordable housing from coming to market as well. And I'm not saying that the best use for this property right here is to put tiny houses on it, but maybe temporarily it is, you know, because guess what, guys? This empty lot has been here for over a decade, okay? I've been coming here for a long time, selling real estate in this area, and this empty lot's been here for as long as I can remember. And why is it still empty? Well, one of two reasons. Either the owner of the property wants to keep it vacant and maybe they are holding it empty until they get the right price for it, or they're not able to build what they want to build there, so they need to sell it to somebody who can build something there or wants to build something there. So we have land, okay? And like I shared with you guys before, I went on my road trip across the entire United States. There is no shortage of empty land across the entire country. It's out there. But like we discussed in that video, it's in places that people don't want to live, right? All the desirable places are the places that are booming right now when it comes to real estate prices, and no one wants to live in the middle of Nebraska or, you know, the empty spaces in Colorado and Utah or whatever. By the way, guys, I remember last time I was over in this area, a couple of you said, oh, that's Dexter's place. And I never saw the show, so I watched a couple episodes based on your recommendations, and this is it right here. This is the building, but it's on the other side, so you can't really see it from here. And right next door to Dexter's building used to be an empty lot all these years, and now look what they're building. Multi-million-dollar condos. So that's what the government said it's okay to build here. You don't see them building affordable housing for people that live and work in the area that need a place to live. So another example of how the government does make things worse, because this is what they say you can build here, and it doesn't really help anyone. Truly, the last thing Miami needs is more multi-million-dollar condos or homes, guys, because as you have seen on my walks here, that's basically all we have here now. And you know, do we need more of them? Absolutely not. But that's what's being built, because that's what's profitable for developers, and the cities love this, guys. The governments love when you're going to come in and build a multi-million-dollar development like this, because what does that bring in? More tax money. More tax money in the form of impact fees for building this, the building permit fees, the inspections, everything that needs to happen for this place to go up. Top that off with the fact that once real estate is actually being sold and lived in here, the property taxes are going to be through the roof. So the county and the city gets to collect way more in property taxes. They love this stuff. So they don't really have the incentive either to help out people. So remember that as well. So I guess what I was trying to say in that video is, since the government's involved anyways, maybe it's time that they finally reverse some of the damage that they've done over the decades of making housing completely unaffordable for the average person. And I understand the pushback against that, and I'm not saying that these guys should be involved either, but what's the solution, guys? Share some real ideas in the comments below, because I really want to know. So just try to share legitimate ideas on what can be done without the government being involved, because that's what I want to know. And obviously, I also think the answer is to build more housing, but once again, you have to cut through the red tape of the government to be able to do that. And I actually had more stories I wanted to share with you guys in this video today, but I think we've already gone long enough, so I'll put them in a future video. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I put out a new upload. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next video on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.